Hello and welcome. Good morning. Thank you for joining us for Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest today is Mary C. Curtis, award-winning journalist, trainer, and speaker, former New York Times editor, currently with CQ Roll Call. She has also contributed to NBC, Washington Post, NPR, and works closely with the Op-Ed Project, which we'll learn about later in today's show. Our host is Srinivasan. He's been hosting the show for 5 years and counting. Please make sure to share this live stream. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We're also live on Mary's Facebook page and Twitter account. So thank you to all of our friends for joining us today. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the executive producer and often guest host of the show. Without further ado, we'll bring on Srinivasan and welcome our viewers. Sri?
Hello.
Good morning.
How are you, Neil?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm
You're
on
still
Fire
in
Island, which is about an hour outside Manhattan for another couple of days. And then we are back in Manhattan in the what was the epicenter and now feels a little safer than so many other parts of the country.
What's it been like Fire Island? You're staying away from folks on the beaches. You're wearing masks going out to dinner. You're not partying with people, are you?
No, we're not partying, and we have masks on the beach. And this town, people wear masks. In a town over, we see lots of people without masks. And that's the town where you see people with lots of Trump signs and Trump flags. Here you see Black Lives Matter signs, and there you see Trump flags. So you get a sense of what's going on. Good
to know. Glad you and the family are staying safe. Let's go ahead. We have a number of people who have already checked in. It'd be great to say hi to them. As a quick reminder, and the message is on the screen, if you're watching on Facebook or Twitter, make sure you're clicking on the video itself and commenting. If you might be watching this in a stream, in a timeline, or watching it through someone's share on Facebook, click on the actual video. So if you comment, we see your comment and we'll be able to put it on the screen. Sri, you also have the Wall Street Journal with you.
Yes, we have. We're going to talk about the New York Times extensively, but my wife, Rupa, as you know, is a management consultant and business strategist. She's head of strategy at a major company, and so she never goes anywhere without the Wall Street Journal. And our plan is to read the journal one of these days. And the headline here is American warns Boeing on MAX orders. So that's one of the headlines here. And Trump dims hopes for next stage of China trade accord. That's the cover of the journal right now.
And of course, the big news about Trump is that he finally wore a mask, which
yes, that was the news. And they had to contrive an event for him to wear the mask. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. Jonathan's here. Hello from Union Square.
Martin Olson, Carrie Young. We'll check with Mary Curtis when she comes on. These might be friends of hers, or might be others that have found your feed. I think you know this next person, Sri, right? Hi, yes, Mom.
Mom is watching from Hastings-on-Hudson. That's terrific. Hello, and everyone watching, please tell us where you're watching from. Tell us how your Sunday is going, what you're up to, what you're going to be doing. And Patricia says, hi, New York Times Read Along from New York. Watching Northeast Pennsylvania. Hi, Tim.
And Diane Stefani from Margate, New Jersey. And Chitachi as well. Thank you to Chitachi for joining us.
I just wanted to say about Chitachi, she has been a guest on this show and also my daily COVID-19 show that we do every single day. And she was our guest on the July 4th edition so that we could talk about what America means to her and us. And we learned so much. Please look at the archives for this show as well as all our shows on youtube.com/Sreenet. SREENET.
Absolutely. And Chitachi is joining us from Fort Lauderdale today. Usually in Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Usually Fort Lauderdale. Great. And Cass Robertson is watching from Baltimore. She's a friend of Mary's. cast, thank you for joining us. So before we go any further, Sri, I want to make a reference to our production team. We wouldn't be able to put on this show without a full team. Of course, Sri is the host of the show. I'm the executive producer and guest host, and I'll be guest hosting next week. We'll get to that a little bit later. But our production team is Paula Kiger. You can follow her at Big Green Pen. Steve Taylor at Steve DeReeve. Julia Weeks at Julia L. Weeks, and Carla Baranauckas at Cabara, Cabara. What we do, which is different from a lot of other folks, we have people who are in Facebook, in this case, Paula, responding to comments, dropping in links, engaging with the audience. Steve Taylor is usually in LinkedIn. Julia Weeks is stepping in this week, so she'll be your guide there. And Carla has done an incredible job working with us to help coordinate a number of guests, including Mary C. Curtis, today's guest. So thank you, Carla, for all of your work. And we really, these four are really the backbone of the show. And we wouldn't have the interaction and the engagement without them. So thank you so much for everything you do. Please make sure you follow them on Twitter. And if you're interested in having us produce a show like this for you, you can get in touch with either Sri or myself, and we'd be more than happy to talk with you. We've actually built quite a business out of this in terms of doing live stream productions. A lot of conferences that thought about being canceled, we've been able to take them virtual. We have some regular shows that we do. There's some ones coming up as well. Sri, you can just take a moment. There's a great show coming up Thursday that I think folks might be interested in knowing more about.
Super excited. This is 8 p.m. Eastern. This is Little Steven's Roadshow, and you all know Steve Van Zandt from his work with the E Street Band, as well as being Silvio on The Sopranos, and one of my favorite Netflix shows, the first Netflix original, Lilyhammer. And he is hosting a series of conversations that will be benefiting Teach Rock and teachrock.org. And so just go to teachrock.org/roadshow. It's a free concert that you, not a concert, but a talk show where we'll talk about music and other ways to understand education. teachrock.org/roadshow. His guests this time are Kanya Das, Kid Leo, Michael Stanley, Neil Giraldo. This is going to be amazing. Neil Giraldo, by the way, is a longtime collaborator of Chrissy Hines of The Pretenders, and they're also husband and wife.
And Pat Benatar as well. He's worked with a number of people. Michael Stanley, great guest. Earlier Thursday,
he wrote the song. What is this? Since you mentioned the music, we have to tell people he wrote "Jesse's Girl," which is one of my favorite songs of all time.
And then earlier on Thursday evening, we're doing a show with called The News Project Live. We produced this for Meryl Brown and Alex Leo, and the guest this week is going to be the CEO of WNYC out of New York, Goli Sheikholeslami. So we're looking forward to that. That's a great weekly conversation with media industry experts and innovators about the future of news. Last week, we had the reporter on the New York Times covering the Facebook boycott, Stop the Hate for Profit campaign, and Gordon Burrell talking about local advertising. And the week before that, we had Brian Stelter on the show, which was really exciting. One other show after the New York Times read-along, we definitely want you to stay to watch She's on Call. Sri, can you tell us a little bit about She's on Call?
Yeah, this is an exciting new show, medical and health information that you can learn from two of my friends, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian. They've both been guests on both the read-along as well as the Daily COVID show. So please tune in. And they're going to have their first male guest, Dr. Quinn Capers. And he is an extraordinary physician, and he will be sharing his thoughts, as will Dr. Susmita Pati. So you're going to learn a lot. It's at 11 a.m. Eastern time today. Just go to at She's on Call on Facebook and on Twitter.
And as I mentioned, if you're interested in having us produce a show like that for you, please contact Sri at Sri.net, and we'll be in touch. The other announcement that we'd like to make before we get into our show is to thank our sponsors. We get a lot of great support, and there are 3 sponsors that we'd like to recognize. The first would be Muckrack.
And we are delighted to say that Muckrack Academy's Fundamentals of Social Media has more than 4,000 folks who are taking this class. It's a free certification. It's available right now. You get a certificate at the end of it. It's about 2 hours of work. You can do it in 2 hours, 2 days, 2 months, up to you. mrac.co/social. Sign up now, any age, any background, anywhere in the world.
Thank you, Sri. We'd also like to recognize another sponsor, Magic Bus USA. Magic Bus imagines a world where children break out of poverty and lead fulfilling, rewarding lives, contributing to their community and to the world around them. As you can see, 7 out of 10 adolescents do not have a higher secondary qualification. 6 out of 10 youth do not have the soft skills necessary for employment. And 3 out of 10 girls are married before they reach the age of 18. Those statistics, of course, refer to the situation in India. So thank you, Magic Bus, for your support. We would also like to recognize Strategy Focus Group as another one of our sponsors. In addition to Muckrack and Magic Bus USA, Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Thank you again to Greg Gallant and Mike Schneider from Muckrack, Pradnya Haldapur from Magic Bus USA, and Ron Thomas, a frequent viewer and guest back in January from Strategy Focus Group, for your support. I should say Pradnya Haldapur was also a guest for our special Mother's Day edition, which was really great. So again, if you're interested in learning more about our sponsors, please visit their links, readalong.link/muckrack, readalong.link/magicbususa, or readalong.link/strategy focus group. And if you're interested in sponsoring the New York Times Read Along, please contact Sri or myself. Our email addresses are at the bottom of the screen.
A big shout out to our sponsors. They make it possible for us to do this and have such a great team behind us. And Ron Thomas, who is with the Strategy Focus Group team, he says hello to the A-team earlier in the comments. Folks, tell us where you're watching from. Please tell us what you're up to, and we're ready now to meet Mary.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and we will show more of the comments throughout the show. But there's Ron Thomas's shout out. Thank you again, Ron. Appreciate it.
I see that Sujana's tuned in, Sujana Chandrasekhar, the surgeon, the ENT surgeon, who is co-host of She's on Call. Hi, Sujana. Looking forward to seeing you at 11 a.m. Eastern time.
Absolutely. And we have several people who have also taken the Muckrack Academy course, Sri, including Patricia Freudenberg. She's commenting that she thought the Fundamentals of Social Media course was really great and enjoyable. So more on that later. But now we will bring on again Mary Curtis. Again, Mary Curtis, award-winning journalist, trainer, and speaker. We look forward to seeing her on the show. And here we go.
Thanks, Neil, and hi, Mary.
Good morning. How are you, Sri?
I'm good, thank you. My first question always is, how are you doing, and how's your family through the crisis?
We're hanging in there. My home base is Charlotte, North Carolina, and we're a state that's had some challenges, but we're in a phase of everyone's wearing the face mask. My husband is with me, Martin Olson. He was, I think, the first one that tuned in. And, we had to put back a big trip that he had planned. His grandfather emigrated to New York from Kristiansand, Norway in the 1890s, and we were going to go on a Scandinavian trip in May. But of course, that was canceled. And so, we are we're doing well, working a lot from the dining room studio, as you can see. And most of the folks in my family are teachers or professors. My son's a professor in New York, Zane Curtis Olson, and he's been teaching, history professor. And my niece in Baltimore, Carrie Curtis Young, who did tune in as well, teaches in the Baltimore school system, she and her husband. And they have 2 little ones at home. So they've been home teaching and teaching online. So far, so good, but it is difficult.
Well, we salute teachers on this show because there are folks who help make part of the extraordinary work that we have to think about as we reopen, and also what they did for us this spring with students. I'm sure some of you have seen the Shonda Rhimes tweet that I think is one of the tweets of the year. She said at the very beginning of the pandemic, "I've been homeschooling for an hour and teachers don't get paid enough. They should be paid $1 billion a year," she said in her tweet.
I agree with that. I'm happy to leave it up to the others, and I am very much in awe of my son and others. And my late mother was a teacher as well, so it's a great tradition of that in our family. So.
Oh, awesome! That is great. So let's just tell people that we have the New York Times ready to go, and we're going to look at it. But we want to talk to you for a couple of minutes just about you, your career, your work, and let's start there, and then we'll get to the Times.
Great. That sounds, not that there's a lot of news this week.
No, not at all. Very quiet. And I should say to everyone that my newsletter, which just dropped around 8 a.m. Eastern time, was about the education crisis in America. And I encourage everybody who hasn't subscribed yet to please subscribe. You can find it srinet.substack.com, or email me and I'll add you to the newsletter. One of the things, since you mentioned Norway and Scandinavian countries, the president has been saying we should just open up like the way they're opening up in the Scandinavian countries. But what he's not acknowledging is that in some of those Scandinavian countries, they had 10, 15, 20 new cases, whereas in America, we've had 3 days in a row of 69,000 cases. So how you can make that comparison, I don't know. But that's the kind of misinformation and disinformation that's fueling this pandemic in this country and around the world. But first, Mary, let's talk about your work. Tell us a little bit about your work. You've worked at so many extraordinary organizations.
Yes, including the New York Times, which is how I know Carla and your last week's guest. Yes, I worked there for almost 9 years at the New York Times, doing a variety of work. I went from the Baltimore Sun, where I was the arts editor, to work in the arts department of the Times. And then I also worked in the home section. I edited that, and I helped launch the living arts section in the national edition before I ended up working in the education life area, editing education reporters. But I grew up actually in West Baltimore, but was always interested in the news because I grew up in a family. I'm the youngest of 5 children, and my oldest 3 siblings were involved in the civil rights movement. So I was very aware at a very young age of the news, of social justice, of what was going on, particularly when it came to issues of inequality. So I got very interested as an observer, as a professional observer, as they had their meetings in our home. I guess I was always a journalist before I knew it. And I did work at other places before that. I worked at the Arizona Daily Star, the Associated Press. My son was born actually in Tucson when I worked there, then the Baltimore Sun, then the New York Times. And I was mostly an editor, but I started to gradually write more and more. So I was hired at the Charlotte Observer in Charlotte, North Carolina, to be basically the assistant managing editor for features over the arts and the features areas. And I started to write a little bit, and gradually the writing took over. And I've settled on, I write about the intersection of politics, culture, and race for the most part. And I took a break to be a Nieman Fellow at Harvard for a year. And when I came back, concentrated even more on that area and being a full-time columnist. And my work after the Observer has taken me to be a national correspondent for America Online's Politics Daily, which is no more, and then the Washington Post She the People blog. And now, for the most part, at Roll Call writing a column. But my work is all over. I've branched out to do more radio and television, which is something this old-fashioned print person never thought I would do. And I twice a week, I'm on a local television show in Charlotte doing commentary on WCCB, which is a CW affiliate. I also do quite a bit for sometimes NPR national shows, and often their local affiliate, WFAE, including recently a candid conversation on race that I hosted. And as you said earlier, I've taken it through to be a facilitator for the Op-Ed Project, which is, their mission is my own, which is to get a variety of voices into public debate, particularly on opinion pages. Because as we've seen recently with the marches and protests about racial inequities that extend not just to policing, but to the health area, as we've seen with the disproportionate cases of COVID, housing, education, and so much more. It's so important to have so many people narrating our world. And that's one of their slogans, is that the stories we tell become the world we live in. So that works quite well with the work I am doing. And I am a culture vulture. I do sometimes slip a lot of, I'll put Hamilton or movies and make different references to my work, even in politics and race, because I think that's where people all indulge in culture and pop culture, so you can reach people very well in that way. So it's been a very fulfilling career, and I've contributed, little hint, I've contributed to many people's books, but I'm also working on my own now because it's about time. And I think right now where we're having these debates, it's the time to do it. So that's the short version of my journey in journalism and a little bit in life.
And I know you didn't do it full justice, but what an incredible story already. I want to show a couple of photographs from your album that we have to share. So let's take a look. I think these are people some folks may recognize. So let's take a look at a couple of these photographs. I wonder who this is.
Yeah, that's my sister. No, that's Michelle Obama. And actually that was very interesting. This was before she was First Lady. I've covered the last 4 presidential campaigns, 2008 through 16, and now 2020. And this was the day after she gave her big speech in Denver at the Democratic Convention in 2008. Remember, that was the first time Barack Obama was nominated, and she introduced herself, was very well received. And the day after, she gave interviews with 5 journalists, women journalists from swing states. They were always strategic, the Obama. So you had me from North Carolina, you had someone from Georgia, from Colorado, from Ohio. And afterward, I went to take a picture, and you can see the expression on my face was fairly startled because Michelle Obama is that hugger. And she gave me a hug. And I like to tell people she is as she seems. I got the opportunity to interview her quite a few times during their 2 terms, because as I said, often they would have, I was from North Carolina, which helped. I was based here, even though my work takes me all over. And it's a state that went barely for Obama in 2008. It went barely for Romney in 2012. Trump won in 2016, but not by much. So it is a state that's always in play, and we see plenty of the candidates. In fact, before the lockdown, the last event I covered was a Trump rally in early March here in Charlotte. And so because the state is always in play, and this year we also have a gubernatorial race. We have a Democratic governor, and the Republican lieutenant governor is running against him. And we have a Senate race that may determine whether Democrats can retake the Senate. We have Tom Tillis, the Republican incumbent, running against Cal Cunningham, a veteran and a very attractive candidate for the Democrats. The polls now are neck and neck. But it was my pleasure to interview the First Lady. And yes, she is.
I saw that hug, and Paula says, "Love, love, love the pic with Michelle Obama." And here's another great photograph, another great American.
Yeah, this is with John Lewis. Actually, it's my sister who was involved in the civil rights movement. Joan is deceased, and this was her favorite picture because she said, "Mary, you're glowing." And I said, "Well, I'm next to John Lewis." And I just admire him so much. He's been working all his life for civil rights, and he is still fighting refighting some of the same fights, unfortunately, as voting rights, which now we've seen so many, that's a big issue with me. So many people marched for it, died for it. He got his head cracked open, as we all know, his skull broke, smashed on the Edmund Pettus Bridge when he was a young man in his 20s. And he's still, as a congressman, fighting as some of those rights are after the Supreme Court decision invalidated parts of the Voting Rights Act. He's still fighting. And I got a chance to meet and speak with him. And I, as I said, I thought about him and, of course, my sister, who was at the March on Washington. My three older siblings were all doing something. And she told me that while everyone spoke about Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, that as a young person, she very much related to John Lewis's speech. And her job was making signs for people who came from out of town to carry in the march. So also, I do get occasionally a chance to get dressed up. So that was pretty good too.
And John Lewis is an extraordinary man. I had the honor of meeting him as well. And I'm hoping that I can find a photo and share it with you in a little while. But let's get started. Oh, we'll look at one more photo. Tell us about this.
One more. That is Dolores Huerta. If people don't know, she is maybe not as broadly known, but of course she's historic. She co-founded what became the United Farm Workers with Cesar Chavez. And, my son, whose fields are education and labor, was particularly impressed. We were both speaking at an event at Harvard Law School. After I was a Neiman Fellow there, I was invited back on some occasions. And this was an event that was my law school professor there, because when you're a Neiman, you can take classes in anything. And I had Charles Ogletree, and he was having a conference with Desmond Tutu and Sandra Day O'Connor and Dolores Huerta and me. So I got a chance to actually speak on panels with her. And she is still active and writing and speaking, but because of Cesar Chavez, she probably did not get as much of the publicity, but she was right there.
That's great that you were able to meet all these historic folks, people who made such a big difference.
I can't believe it. This little girl from Baltimore, right?
Yeah. Well, this is what I always say, that this little guy whose father was born in a small village in India has a chance to come here and talk to folks like you and meet John Lewis. That says something extraordinary about America. There's that photo of John. I love that. I'm very proud of that photo as well. And you can see I'm dressed up by my standards there. You see as well.
I think we all glow when we stand next to him, don't we?
Yes, we do. And so that point that America, which allows and lets people like me have an opportunity, which has given you this extraordinary career in life, how do you reconcile it with the America that also is so, in many ways, racist, unequal, unjust?
Well, a lot of it, I give so much credit to my parents, my late parents. My father was, his mom died when he was young. He only got an 8th grade education, and he worked so hard to educate himself, and he always had several jobs, and he had 5 children, and my oldest brother went to law school and became a judge. And my mother had to drop out of college when her mother was sick. She went back and became a teacher, but they still had to overcome so much. I think when this thing happened with George Floyd, so many people, it was a revelation, but to others, we realized that this is just, that's my parents. And that actually is my father. He was dressed in, he came back from a job waiting and tending bar, which he would do after he finished his regular job. So he worked all the time, and that was our kitchen which is where we spent so much time. He's with my mom. And the whole neighborhood came, you know, it was where we spoke and ate, and it was one of those gathering places. But yet racism really, it was the structure that determined everything, where we went to school, where we lived. The house I live in now in Charlotte, North Carolina, is in a neighborhood that has restricted covenants in the deeds. It says you cannot sell or rent to anyone not of the Caucasian race. And they were enforceable until 1968 when the Fair Housing Act was passed. Think about that. And even after that, Blacks couldn't move into the neighborhood because they would have been harassed. So no Black folks lived here until the 80s, and we moved here in the 90s. And when you look at the neighborhood, it has beautiful roads, many stores, beautiful grocery stores, great schools. That didn't happen by accident. And I try to explain that to people who feel they are well educated, that this is the way our country has been since its founding, that people were disadvantaged. And it wasn't just a country that had flaws. It's a country that disadvantaged many to the advantage of others. That's just the truth. And when we think of the laws, the Civil Rights Act, those were only in the 60s. So we even didn't start to become an equal society until not that long ago. And, you know, I explain to people, when you talk about policing, my first sort of realization of what police did is when I was a toddler and my brother Tony was arrested in civil rights demonstrations. So the law enforcement officers whose salaries my parents paid because with their taxes arrested their son for breaking a law, yes, that was an unjust law. And that was what, you know, so my father was running around trying to get the deed to the house, making sure my brother didn't spend the night in jail, and they got a civil rights lawyer, Juanita Jackson Mitchell, and she got him out. But our experiences are so different. And I just think people have to realize that. And so, yes, there are many opportunities, and I wouldn't be anything but an American. James Baldwin speaks so well about loving it, but yet seeing its flaws because you do love it so much. So I think people just have to open up their eyes to how we were founded and how even after enslavement of men, women, and children, you had Jim Crow. And yes, you can achieve, but it does take a superhuman effort for many minorities to take advantage and get there. And so that's what I would say. And I always said that Black folks are more patriotic than anyone I know, you know, because they fought and died in every war in this country for the ideals. They fought for a country that wouldn't acknowledge them because they believed, as Martin Luther King said, in the words of our founding documents that are beautiful if we would only live up to them. I really love this conversation that's going on now about race because people are listening, but let's hope it continues. Americans have short attention spans.
Unfortunately, they do. Well, let's continue to have this conversation as we look at the New York Times. And yes. I want to say that there was a beautiful comment. Someone said that they loved that photograph we saw of your parents, and that person says, I love, love, love that picture of my grandparents. So that was Cheryl watching.
Oh, I'm getting emotional. It is the American story, isn't it?
It really is, and we're very proud. By the way, do you see Hamilton right there?
You mean, did I see the play?
No. Do you see the water bottle, my Hamilton water bottle? Yes,
I'm a Hamilton nut. I know all the words. I saw it 3 times, twice on Broadway with the original cast. You don't want to know. As I said, I'm a theater geek. I think the people at Roll Call said, enough Hamilton references, Mary, in the columns, no more.
Well, I want to tell you that we had a show on my daily COVID-19 show this week where we talked to 3 lawyers who have written a book out with 30 other folks about Hamilton and the law and looking at today's most contentious issues through the musical. So you're going to love that book. It's coming out in October. And my episode is available on my youtube.com/3net archives. Please, everyone, check that out. It's called Hamilton and the Law. And we really wanted to just sing the whole show, but we did not.
Oh, no. It's interesting. One of the folks that I mentored at the Op-Ed Project was when I was doing a program at Yale. And one of the professors was Joanne Freeman, who was one of the Hamilton scholars that Lin-Manuel Miranda referenced because she wrote a book on Hamilton's writings and also on duels. So small world.
It really is. All right, let's look at the paper and let's talk about all that's going on. I'm just going to pull up the paper here. How to restart school this fall baffles experts. Your thoughts on school openings?
It's a tough one. I feel, as you said earlier, when you look at the Scandinavian countries and other countries, not only had they done a lot to bring the cases down, but they're putting incredible amounts of money into making the schools not COVID proof, but I saw where Denmark, they were building extra bathrooms so folks could wash their hands and social distance. And yeah, I'm a mixed mind. One of the things I volunteer with is Freedom Schools, which works with kids during the summer. We weren't able to do it this summer, of course, to make sure, particularly underrepresented and kids that don't have the resources to do summer camps, that they don't lose the reading between when school ends and school starts. And it's really focused on that. And there's so many kids who get instruction, food, kids who are food insecure at schools, whose parents work, and they have a lot of those essential jobs. So yes, I think it would be great if schools could reopen. That said, have we made it safe enough for not only the children, but for the teachers who are coming in? And that is, I think it's difficult. We're gonna have to, before you say, as the president and Betsy DeVos, the education secretary, have said, you have to reopen. I think you also have to make sure it's safe for the kids and for the teachers, and put the resources toward that. Put the resources toward that. I think the teachers are very skeptical and have reason to be. But at the same time, we've seen with the schools closed that who falls behind? The kids that don't have the internet service, that kind of thing. So I would love to, but they are going to have to put the resources in, or else I think there'll be some teachers that don't want to go, and there'll be obviously some children whose parents won't feel safe sending them, particularly those who family members and the kids themselves have immunocompromised. And I have several acquaintances, and that is the case. And they are very, very afraid.
And we had a comment here from Terry. Let's pull that back up, talking about how, as a teacher, I would love to go back in person, but not in the current circumstances.
Yes.
And here's a photo we're looking at on the front page of the New York Times. Many schools are unequipped to ventilate spaces properly. So that you can see how crowded that is. And that's a problem,
yes.
For sure.
Yes, and I know in South Carolina, for instance, they always have those, the quarter of shame. So many schools that haven't been retrofitted for decades, that have problems even in the best of times with ventilation, heating, cooling, mold, things like that. That would only be exacerbated if the schools themselves couldn't be equipped properly.
There's a beautiful comment that I want to read that just came up. Let's first read this. Here we go. Genevieve says, "Thank you for inviting me. So great to see you live, Mary C. Curtis. So great to hear about your continuing success. I look forward to hearing more. Your book, your words, your wonderful mind and powerful spirit."
Oh, thank her. Oh, thank you so much. We worked together at the New York Times. She was a page designer, and particularly, yes, we worked together. It's nice to have this New York Times reunion. I really enjoyed meeting. There were so many smart people there. I just so enjoyed every single person that you would meet. You'd see a copy editor on the national desk, and they wrote some incredible book about geography. And I just could talk with with folks. I worked with Gladys Bourdain on the copy desk and in the arts section, and she would be on the phone speaking French beautifully because she was fluent and used to work at Agence France Presse. I felt like it was an education. And thank you so much for writing that. And yeah, a lot of memories.
Jane Myers-Riley says, summer regression is a big concern for students, even more this year. Funds needed to go to schools, but cuts are threatened by 45. Let's look at the Times here. With an ER doctor's suicide, the virus took another life. Tragic story that we had heard about earlier, but now the Times has gone in and done some serious reporting around this. And also another important story, Camden, New Jersey, the city that fired its whole police department, one of the country's riskiest cities until it disbanded and rebuilt its police force. Very important story. And Biden is urged to make a play for more states. Let's talk a little bit about that. There are way too many people who are overconfident, Mary, that are predicting the end of Donald Trump's presidency, or that he will not be re-elected.
Yeah, I read that story, and actually I read about the ER doc because that was beautifully written, and the Camden. I got up early this morning. The front page, the page is amazing. On the Biden story, I think, remember in 2016, Hillary Clinton was feeling very confident, and she was speaking about, oh, I think I might win Arizona. And it turned out they didn't win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio, and those states. And so you can see a lot of the Biden folks who want to be cautious and make sure that they, have solidified the states that he is doing well in. I do feel that, yes, you can be overconfident. People will tell you things in polls and they'll get in the booth and vote a certain way. A part of it is turnout. Biden has to make sure that the people for him are enthusiastic. And so far it seems, some of the younger people, I know my son was a Bernie guy, and others, they need the enthusiasm to come out. And that's a part of it as well. And even though he is not Hillary Clinton and he doesn't have her negatives, I feel that is that they have to shore up if they want to win. Also, I do believe, as I said earlier, you have the whole argument now about voting. We've seen in Wisconsin and Georgia and other places with the primaries, what a muck up, what a problem they had with their primaries. Not enough machines that work, long lines, and people will be apprehensive about coming out with COVID. Poll workers not showing up because some of the older ones were apprehensive, and all the debate over mail-in voting, and the president is saying it's rigged, and absentee voting and balloting. And so I think that now is going to be very big for the Biden campaign to make sure that the voting is going the way it's supposed to be going. And I know, I've done, from all the reporting, the Republicans are putting quite a bit of money into that, even into having poll watchers to go and challenge voters at the different polls. So I think both sides are going to have armies of lawyers. So it's not just the vote, it's what happens to your vote. And I would encourage everybody to make sure they are registered and their registrations are valid so you don't get any surprises. And, the campaigns, yes, Biden would be, and also it's a long time between now and November. We saw the Comey letter happen in October for Hillary Clinton. You've heard of that old October surprise. You can be sure that things will change.
There will be many. That's right. There will be many October surprises.
Although COVID, of course, unfortunately, it does not look like it is going away. And the story of the doctor was just crushing because she seemed as though, as her family said, she just cared so much and she felt totally overwhelmed. And she was an achiever all her life. And this was something that she couldn't get a hold of. And it was so unfortunate. What a heartbreaking story.
Eileen Roberson is here, watching from Baltimore, former classmate at St. Pius V.
That's my grade school. I tell you, I do keep my friends. And Jane Myers Raleigh went to my high school. My grade school, St. Pius V, it was taught a little bit of history by a Black order of nuns, the Oblate Sisters of Providence, formed in 1829 to educate Native Americans and African Americans by a nun from the Caribbean and a French priest. Yes, a little bit of history about Black Catholicism thrown in. But Mary, it's so funny because I use my middle initial. I was named after my grandmother, but also in Catholic schools, there were so many Marys, and Mary Eileen was one of them. So we were all known by both names. And then I went to the high school, Catholic high school, which was the Daughters of Charity, St. Vincent de Paul, Seton. And that was predominantly white. It had integrated a few years before I went there.
I went to Catholic. I was born in a Catholic hospital and went to Catholic school on 3 continents. So I'm very familiar with nuns and priests and the extraordinary educational opportunities I got in multiple continents because of them. And we also had a comment here from Linda Bernstein, who is on our team, and she and I produced that Muckrack social media course that we're offering to everyone. And she says that Mary was a really fun editor to work with and nice.
Wow. Well,
are you paying all these people, Mary, to come in here and say all these nice things?
I didn't pay them, I promise. I did want to jump in and chat a little bit about the Camden story too, because I think what they did was disband the department, and then they did rehire some of the police that worked there, but you had to be interviewed. And now when you are hired, the first thing you do is meet members of the community, because I think that is when people say we don't want policing, I think everyone wants policing. They just want good policing. They want to be policed in a fair way. I grew up in a community that was underprotected and over-policed. And that's I think what people want. So Camden did that. And I think that their rates of violent crime did go down, although no city is it a perfect solution. But as we see now, if you live in one community, you get policed in one way. And most people are law abiding and they don't want to be considered perps. I've been profiled, my son's been profiled, most everybody in my family has. And so you're very apprehensive. When I get a little nervous when I see a police car, even though I know I haven't done anything wrong. So that was the Camden approach. So we'll see what is going on. The reporting says some police in Georgia and in Minnesota are retiring or saying that they feel besieged because of the protests. But I think that's another continuing conversation. So
look at this note from Alyssa, who says she's up in Cali watching you, my BFF.
Oh, I love Alyssa Bennett. She's a publicist extraordinaire in LA, and we met her when we both worked together at the Observer, and when she did the promotions department in North Carolina. And she's from North Carolina, but she's conquered Hollywood.
Nice, very cool. Look, I just want to show you, we have now finished. I'm just pulling back here so you can see the entire New York Times on screen. There are multiple editions, as you can see. We have completed page 1 of about 100 pages. So we'll be here for at least another several hours if we don't speed this up.
Yeah, well, I know they have Roger Stone somewhere, don't they?
Yeah, there's so much here to talk about in this. I love this little element they have in the Times on this day in history. Eisenhower nominated on the first ballot for the Republican nomination. Who would have thought that all these years later, Dwight Eisenhower and his warnings about the military-industrial complex are held up as, things that we should be aware of. And this year is so crazy that I'm cheering for John Bolton and Mitt Romney.
Well, it is interesting that the Republican Party of Eisenhower is the party that nominated Donald Trump. It's a kind of different. My mom, my parents were Lincoln Republicans, and my mom was quite active in the Republican Party. She was one of those elections judges that would go to the polls the day of to make, and make sure there was a Democrat and a Republican there. But I think when it came around Reagan and he opened his campaign in Mississippi, the Philadelphia, talked about states' rights and would talk about welfare queens. And, my family, they were very conservative, but they felt a little betrayed because people don't realize that many African Americans were Republicans. Now they think mostly they really are Democrats, but they were put off by a lot of the rhetoric.
Here's that art. Remember this tweet I told you about the president? And it's being tweeted by the Lincoln Project. You can see that he was comparing countries in Scandinavia that had 10 and 11 cases to America that has 57,000. The Lincoln Project, we had Rick Wilson here. The Lincoln Project is a series of Republicans who have left the not the party, I guess, but are left the Trumpist wing of the party and are calling out their colleagues. And so to see this is quite amazing. And by the way, Trump again this week said, did you know that Lincoln was a Republican? Nobody knew that. Only he knew that. It's because he knows no history. And those of my friends who defend Trump because of his tax rules and things like that are learning that they are supporting a man who is unlearned in every single way.
Yes, Lincoln was the Republican. And he also, I think, said Frederick Douglass, more and more people.
Yes, more and more people are discovering him, that he's doing great work.
Yeah, and that Trump said that he made Juneteenth famous, which was fascinating to me. I was like, it's been celebrated for quite a while. And also his knowledge of the Confederacy, the way he talks about Confederate heroes is very strange also, which fought the Republican Lincoln. So yes, he's, my husband's a New Yorker, so he's known Trump what Trump is about for so long. And he always liked to say, everybody knew who he was.
He didn't hide it. I mean, you got to give him credit. He said who he was. He said he was what he was going to do, and he did almost all of it.
Yeah, I mean, he's the same guy who was sued he and his father for discriminating against Blacks in their apartments and things like that. So that was what it was about. It's fascinating to go to a Trump rally, though. I have been to a few, including, like I said, the last one I went in March, and that's when the COVID was just starting, but nobody had a mask on, and people I talked with thought it was nothing. They said, it's like a cold. And he is interesting. He doesn't really give speeches as such. He just throws out, build a wall, lock her up. He has diamond and silk come on. I mean, it's more like an event. He's the showman. And,
he's a showman, and that's what people love, a show. Let's get back to the paper. Tracking an outbreak. Does Cuomo share blame for nursing home deaths? That's one of the questions that's come up. Week of fear and anger as teachers feel pressure to return to class. At a hospital, Trump finally dons a mask, and I like the use of the word don there. But people should realize that his office was trying for weeks to come up with an event where he would be forced to wear a mask and where he could claim that that's the reason he's wearing it. At a time when masks would have saved tens of thousands of lives, this president finally wore a mask in public yesterday. There was one leaked photo of him wearing a mask, but that was it. And you mentioned discrimination by Donald Trump, and here he is on the page, and this is the story. This ad won't discriminate in real estate. People will. And this is about the National Association of Realtors. And that's what Donald Trump did. People who don't know his history need to go back and look at it. Districts tackle vexing question when to restart. And over 100 prominent health experts call for universal mask requirements. This is called Masks for All, to learn the same. And you can see some very big names all over this. The editor-in-chief of the Blood Cancer Journal, the research scientist at the University of San Francisco. There's just so many names here, can't pull them up. Computer science, professor at Harvard Medical School, and Professor Michael Joyner, anesthesiologist and lead investigator of the plasma program for COVID. These are serious people saying, please put on a mask. masks for all. Y'all, how about that? How's my Southern accent there?
Well, pretty good, although I'm a newcomer too. I grew up in Maryland, which is kind of in the middle, but yeah, that's the thing. We have 50 states. So when these other countries have a universal mask mandate, that's one thing. But the thing in the United States is everybody has their own rules. Even to talk about North and South Carolina, when North Carolina had stricter rules, but South Carolina did not. So that's why everyone was saying that the president needed to have that federal mask mandate so that people would all do it, because it's very difficult, the kind of country we have and the attitudes of folks, I can do what I want, and different states had different rules. It's really tough, but with more than 134,000 deaths, it is overwhelming. And so many hospitals, I saw Texas is reaching capacity. The donning a mask is about the least thing you can do, although it is, they say the mask, social distance, wash your hands. And it seems like we can't even get that together.
No, I'm going to physically explode. Pandemics demands make mom rage soar. And this is the slug here is snowballing stress. So I've not seen that before. With children home, working 2 jobs at least with no rest. And a big shout out to all the moms and dads who are working so hard at a time of extraordinary pain, of not just health, but financial pain, and millions of people unemployed. Tense border dispute high in the Himalayas threatens to boil over. This is the China story, China-India border story. To protect young minds, Hong Kong moves to overhaul schools. And Hindu God in a video, fans of K-pop band force quick re-editing. So this was something that happened with I've not even seen this. The Hindu God Ganesha flashed on screen for a music video by Blackpink and all-female K-pop band. So this is also kind of the all international flavor of the world today, that's a Hindu god in a Korean band, in a story out of, with a photo of Indio, California. For 20 years, his firm called him Antoine. Now Mohammed is suing. Mohammed Amgar said in 1996 he was told by his boss to go by the name Antoine so it'd sound more traditionally French. Another unusual story.
I saw that he's saying that they made him have a French sounding name, which is that's when everyone was marching all over the world to talk about George Floyd, but every country had its own problems with racial profiling, racism. And it seemed that, in England and London, they had their names of people. In France, you had cases of discrimination. I had the occasion to travel to Germany a little bit ago to speak about issues of race. And they were very amenable about African Americans, and they all loved Obama. But many people I met there said, oh, but we Arab immigrants, Turks, if you go to our prisons, you'll see mainly Black and brown people. So you see that it is an international reckoning. And the K-pop story is interesting. All of a sudden, K-pop is in every story, from getting tickets to Trump rallies to now they've got a video that they've got to edit.
But the fans made both of that happen, so that's pretty cool.
Who would have thought?
Here's a story about the pandemic in Colombia's poor. Hope is over for Colombia's poor. Tragic story. We had a guest yesterday on my daily COVID show about Brazil and talking about what he called a tropical Trump. That's what they have in Bolsonaro. And he denied this was an issue. And then now Latin America is a big, big hotspot. Defying US, China, and Iran near trade and military deal. After her arrest at a protest, ICE was called. Activists in Arizona face an added peril. And this is about Maxima Guerrero, a Phoenix activist who was handed to immigration officers by the police.
Yeah,
excuse me, sorry.
Yeah, when I lived in Arizona, yes, that is interesting too. I saw that they're building some more wall there, and the ICE is very tough now. And now with the saying that students who are here on student visas can't stay if the universities aren't.
Yeah, this crazy stuff.
Something else.
Top executives press Trump to keep DACA, and Me Too moment for military women after soldiers killing. Very sad about Vanessa Guillen, who was murdered by another soldier. The story about DACA, I should say, when people say things like, oh, this is so cruel, the cruelty is the point. We had Adam Server on our show, Adam Server from The Atlantic, who says that everything that wherever we say cruelty is so sad, well, that's the whole point of this. And earlier, Laura Silverman had a great point when you mentioned a flaw in our system, and she said the flaw is the design itself was meant to have these flaws about the inequality of our country. And look at this extraordinary print paper where they've looked at the Supreme Court and the Court of Public Opinion. And often people think cases are 5-4, and they are in many cases, but you can see some cases are 9-0, 6-3, 9-0, 7-2, 7-2, 7-2, 7-2. So they're not as divided as we think they are, but these 5-4 ones are critical to the future of the Republic. And so that's why it matters. And I believe that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has done her bit. She stayed there for 4. We asked her to hold on, and she did. Now what is going to be the question?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Republicans have always been very strategic about running on the court. And we've seen that Trump has really filled all the federal courts with appointees from the Federalist Society recommending. And that's a huge point. You know, in the last election, 2016, that was a big deal, particularly for evangelicals, that he would get to name people to the courts and to the Supreme Court. And Democrats haven't done well with running on that. Of course, I'm in the home of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and I've interviewed Franklin a few times. And even though Billy had gotten a little bit away from politics after his association with Nixon didn't end well, Franklin has jumped pretty much right in, and he prayed at Trump's inauguration, and he's been pretty vocal about things. And so, yeah, the courts are very key, and everybody has an eye on what's going to happen. Mitch McConnell keeping Merrick Garland off the court has turned out to be a huge issue, of course. And these 5-4 rulings, as you said, are Citizens United, the Voting Rights Act, are really critical ones.
Here's a story. Writer for Tucker Carlson tonight resigns over racist and sexist posts. And he is, in fact, the lead writer for this terrible man on television. And what I said was in my newsletter, I encourage you to, again, everybody, if you don't subscribe to my newsletter, please do, srinet.substack.com. In it, I said that all he was doing was saying in secret, thinly veiled versions of what he was writing for Tucker Carlson in public. And that's what we're seeing now. And it's just outrageous.
Did he fire him because he said, you're keeping all that good material off from me? Because Tucker Carlson pretty much has Black Lives Matter coming through your window. So he's said some incredible, and I've met, Tucker Carlson a couple of times, but boy, yeah, the rhetoric, sometimes I will switch on some of those shows, and it's pretty, if this is all you're seeing, it's pretty outrageous. So yeah, when I saw that, I was like, ho hum.
Yeah.
Is anyone surprised?
No. President ignores, sorry, go ahead.
Go on.
President ignores limit honored even by Nixon. This is about the Roger Stone case. And Nixon is a big hero to both Mr. Stone and Mr. Trump. Mr. Stone has a Richard Nixon tattoo on his back and behind, just below his neck. Herman Benson, a machinist who fought union corruption, is dead at 104. Everton Weekes, a cricket standout who broke barriers in the West Indies. And Martha Rocca, a beauty queen beloved by Brazil.
I know. I saw that because it was saying that she missed out on Miss Universe, and many believe that her figure was too voluptuous for U.S. standards. That was interesting. But yeah, the Stone, we'll see what happens. Even Romney has come out against it. Nixon even didn't go that far of pardoning or commuting the sentences of people involved in his own case, although I was reading the story and it said he kind of wanted to. But
of course he did.
Has any lasting effect because it came out on a Friday, and we see even Bill Barr was recommending against it because of the implications and of the fact, and we saw Robert Mueller come out and said our prosecution was very legitimate. And so, you know, I don't know, but so many people, I think, who are in the criminal justice system who see this happening because he was a friend of the president and he didn't talk to the committee, they're saying, of course, again, that we do not have an equal system of justice, as if anybody doubted that. So I'm not sure how much it will hurt him, but I know the folks on Fox were really pushing it. So.
Yes, they were. Let's move on to the New York Times Magazine. And I want to tell you that the magazine looks extraordinary this week. It's always fascinating. And the cover and the entire issue is all about fiction. And inside the Times column, they talk about this 14th century collection of tales told by 10 characters taking shelter in an Italian villa. It's called The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. And that's what's inspired this. So these woodcuts and things are part of the design. And we have the video behind the cover design video that we're going to look at, and then we'll talk about it. And we'll also give you a little break, Mary, just to kind of relax for a second while we show you this video.
From the New York Times Magazine.
This is behind the cover.
We have a very special issue this week based on Boccaccio's The Decameron, a fiction novel told by a group of characters who have fled Florence during the outbreak of the Black Death. So inspired by The Decameron, we began reaching out to contemporary fiction writers for new works of fiction that approach and address this strange reality of the current global pandemic.
We used a range of illustrators to make art for a number of the stories, but we also wanted to unify the issue by having one illustrator take on the cover, the typography, and some of the spot illustrations. We thought Sophie Hollington would be a great choice for this. She works with folklore and kind of end-of-the-world imagery, which just felt right.
Sophie's process is incredibly labor-intensive.
She sketched out everything first on her iPad, traced it onto linoleum, and then carved away into the negative space of the artwork. She rolls ink onto the surface, presses the paper onto it, and pulls it up and makes a print. Sophie provided a couple of options, one in color and one in black and white. One of the things that we loved about black and white was just the sheer density of it.
Yeah.
I often think that covers either should be really simple or super complex, and this one definitely is on the complex side.
Part of what is notable about the original Decameron is that they're not all stories of death and destruction. That's something that we tried to achieve in this collection of stories as well. Life goes on in strange ways, even in the context of something truly unprecedented and terrifying.
Nice. I hope you guys, everybody had a chance to see it. And Mary, I hope you had a chance to get a glass of water or catch your breath.
And gave me the high sign. So, but yeah, I haven't had a chance to dig into it. I see one of my niece, Carrie, if she's still listening, one of her favorite authors, Edwidge Dandekot, is on there. And I would love to dip into it. You know, the news is so intense, and that's my business, that you need fiction. You need a break. And I have to say, I've been pretty, not quite as good about keeping up as I should, just to get your head out of what's going on every day. So it's gorgeous, though. I looked at it online, and I think it's a wonderful idea to take the.
And they made these little baseball card type illustrations for each of those. And look, Margaret Atwood's there, and as you said, Edgewood, and so many other people. And then I realized my friend Kamala Shamsi has a story in here. She's one of the 10. You can see her where there she is on the. It's a little hard to read, but there she is. Early April and already winter was a memory in Karachi. She's a Pakistani writer, and look how tempting that is to click through and read. So this is just fabulous. Well done, New York Times. Let's take a look at the print magazine itself and see what they've put together here. You can see I'm operating 2 cameras, and life-saving tales, an introduction, and they talk about it here. So I don't know if they have the regular features. They do have all the puzzles. Are you a puzzler?
I have to say no, not much. I should. I was so tempted to say I do it every day.
It's the internet. You're allowed to lie. Everything's up for debate.
No. Maybe it's that Catholic upbringing of mine. I don't want to have to go to confession.
Let's talk about Sunday styles. So much to read here. Unusual story. Harvard without the Ivy. It says, as the university imposes restrictions on housing, social, and classroom opportunities in the coming year, many low-income students feel it is not looking out for them. And to see that in the style section, so interesting. And people should know that Harvard, with its very high standards, does offer anybody who can get in, basically goes for free if you are below a certain cutoff in tuition, in family income. And that's true of many of the top Ivy League schools and other universities in America. Not everybody may be familiar with that, but just fascinating to see this.
I know, but I can see what they're saying. I mean, when I had the year there as a Neiman Fellow, part of it is all the things that are going on around there, all the speakers, the lectures, the workshops, the movie screenings. It is every week I would just look at the Gazette and see, oh, what do I want to do this day? So it is an experience, and I get it. And if part of it is living there, so I can understand. You've made it. You're in Harvard, but you're in home. So.
And universities are wrestling with this. What kind of tuition refund they can get, and all of that's being discussed as well. Let's keep moving. TikTok stars now, reality TV next. This is also connected to that story we looked at, China and India on the border, because India has banned 59 Chinese apps, including TikTok. And TikTok is also being considered by Pompeo for some action. And India is their largest market. 120 million people use it. So they're very worried about what happens. And if you haven't been reading Taylor Lorenz, everybody should read her work. She's fantastic and was the subject of some, only way to call it is kind of bro, these internet bros, VCs and others talking about her and about suppressing journalists. And that was leaked appropriately. Hey, my mom's watching from Carla. Hi, Amma, love you. And this is, she wants to know about you and your friends. This is by Ziwe Fumodo, and she's doing a series. The question she asks is, how many Black friends do you have? And I think that's a good question to ask people right after the situation with the protests and everything. A lot of people have been calling their Black friends saying, what should I do? What can I do? And we had Sunny Slaughter on our show, who's been on the show before, and she said, don't ask us what you can do, ask yourself, what have you been doing? And extraordinary person, by the way, happy birthday to Sunny Slaughter, a great friend of the show.
I've had a lot of people they've been calling me, and I was like, I am not the Black sage. And you do say, what about your circle? Do you have a Black doctor, or do you have friends in your book club? And I think I read a survey that they do in the country that there are a large majority of whites who really don't have Black friends or Black people that they interact with on a regular basis. And I'm not talking about perhaps your kid's teacher or the person in the grocery store, but just true friends. And it is not true of other races. And I think that you can live what is considered a full life in the United States of America, and not only not have any Black friends, but sometimes, you hate to say it, but as someone said earlier, if you have few Blacks in your school or in your neighborhood, that is considered something of value. And that's just the truth. And
that's so tragic. Amber, by the way, everyone follow Amber. She is Mom of All Capes on Twitter. And she runs an amazing podcast with her daughters, and all 4 of them, the 3 daughters and Amber, were on my show. And the show is called K-12 Better. and she's at Mom of All Capes, you know, like superhero capes. And she says, maybe we should be asking how many Black people consider you a friend.
Yeah.
That is a great line. I love that. And do you read the Modern Love column?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay, so we don't have time to read the whole column, but I like the very short, tiny love stories that they have here. The night I met my best friend Bhavya, we clashed over feminism and plastic surgery. I would go on to describe her as a more annoying version of myself. A year later, we argued about the apartment we would move into. We worked our way through medical school, and all the while we argued medical specialties, Netflix shows, politics, ice cream, men, imposter syndrome. Despite the fights, she would always say, stop underestimating yourself, you're brilliant. Someday she will ask me, how did you meet him? But for now, let me tell you how lucky I am to have met her. Amazing. Arij Ali, and a great photo of her and her best friend,
Oh, that's
Bhavya.
nice. Everybody needs a BFF, as Walisa shouted out from California. She has a fun saying, Walisa, when we call and we don't want to be too down on ourselves and we've done something, she'll say, no judgments, just jokes.
Okay, now we come to a part of the program that you may not have known about. We call this, we read the social cues column, and this is the etiquette column, and then we put the question to you. There is no right or wrong answer. Remember, this is etiquette, and don't worry, this won't hurt a bit, as they say. So I'm going to pick a column here. Sisters, you've got to be kidding. This is by Philip Gallan's, who I love his writing and the way he looks at the world. So it says, sisters, you've got to be kidding. When I'm out to lunch with my mom, men often ask, are you two sisters? I think they mean it as a compliment to her, but I find it demeaning. My mom is a vibrant, intelligent woman, but she doesn't look like my sister, and I don't think she should be aspiring to look 25 years younger than she is. How can I let men know their question is inappropriate? Okay, over to you.
How do I let men know it's appropriate? Well, just say she's not my sister. She's my mother. Proud of it. Proud of all she's accomplished. Still going strong. And I learned everything I learned from her.
Love it, love it. So here's what Philip says. Again, no right or wrong answer. Philip says, I hate to be difficult, but I'm pretty sure these men are cracking a corny joke. It's the oldest line in the book. Sure, it betrays their assessment of your mother as an object, which is gross, but you're probably the only one taking it literally. Before you say anything, make sure your mom agrees with you. She is their target after all, right?
That's true. She might love it. I just love it. I tell you, sometimes people have mistaken my son for my stepson, and I don't mind it at all.
My mom looks extraordinarily young, and so my dad would always say that I'm the son of her of his first marriage.
Ah, my husband too sometimes. I'm not sure he likes it too much, but.
Okay, here are these weddings that people are doing now, distant. Her energy got his attention, and so did the blue dress, and they got married. You see the ring light and all of that people now need. Here's an unusual one. At US-Canada border, a barrier to brides and grooms.
Wow.
And she married a clay pot. The breakup was inevitable. To fix a fault in the stars, Mars actually, a woman relied on an Indian ritual. Alicia Haridasani Gupta, who is a writer at the Times, I believe, an editor at the Times, she said she was cursed in Vedic logic, at least, regarding matters of love and marriage.
Wow. Interesting.
Singing at 318 weddings and miming at one. A wedding singer knows all of the sounds or lack thereof of true love. After 7 years in the wedding industry, she still seeks proof of magic. And what you're seeing here, as you know, having worked at the Times, is how the Times has changed, right? These pages used to be filled with very boring photos because they had to be shot in a certain way. Their eyes had to be a certain level, and people of certain society circles were only allowed in here. But look at this. We're seeing men marrying men, women marrying women, Asians, people of color. It's just great to see how things can change. This is proof.
I think it's great. I think it's great. And, my husband and I couldn't have been married in the state where we were married. Well, quite a few, but not that many years before we were. And so I think it's great that the Times is reflecting that, but also it just makes it more interesting and more accurate. When I was an editor and I would talk to reporters, they would come back with stories and they didn't have a certain amount of diversity in them. And occasionally they would grumble about adding something to the story. And I said, no, actually, it's just completing it. It's just reflecting what is. It's making it a better story journalistically. So I think that's part of the debate that's going on in newsrooms around the world, really, and country, about reflecting those different experiences, because we all come with them. It's not as though white is the neutral, is the arbiter. They have their own experiences, as do I, and we're just trying to reflect it. It makes your sources broader and your outlook broader, and it just makes for better journalism. That's end of commercial.
I like that.
My niece has weighed in, Cheryl Bedford from California. I just saw her name flash across. She's a filmmaker.
Lovely. Good. So great to have everybody here. And by the way, your website is maryccurtis.com, so that extra C in there. And also your Twitter handle is mcurtisnc3. So you put in the North Carolina in there.
Yes, at mcurtisnc3. I couldn't be NC1. I mean, that's, I can't be the number one. So I'm at mcurtisnc3. I want to hear from everybody. I want you to follow me. And as I said, it's it always seems like North Carolina is at the center of so many things. That
you managed to. By the way, you taught me something. People who live in Charlotte are called charlatans.
Charlatans. It's way too close to charlatan.
Yeah, exactly. Especially the way it's written.
So people from other parts of the state making that mistake on purpose.
Yes, of course. Here's a tip. Learn how to become your own facialist. I'm obsessed with putting skin cream on my face, as I've learned from my wonderful wife. So I now have to learn how to be my own facialist. Fool your friends with magic tricks, grow hydrangeas of a different sort, open your ears to a good book. That's nice. Are you an Audible book reader, or only physical books or online?
I like
books?
the book. There's something I love about the book. And also I have that thing where I can retain things more spatially as well. So where words fall on the page, I think that's a thing, and I like that. And I have a beautiful book club. We call ourselves Zora's Daughters, after Zora Neale Hurston, African-American writers, thinkers. And we have a little bit of an edge because we know a lot of the authors, so we can get them on the line when we discuss their books. Nice. Another reason why I have to finish mine. It's going to be great, folks. It's changed a little bit because with all the events that's going on, I have really basically taken away a little bit of the artifice and the things you have to do to get ahead. I would say as an African-American woman, I haven't sometimes been able to show truly my whole self because it's not encouraged. And this book is going to be a part of that. It's going to be a social history as well as a memoir. And I've been working feverishly on finishing up the latest draft of the proposal. So wish me luck with that.
We do. We certainly do. And Ron Thomas says this show is such a learning masterclass on Sundays. And thank you so much, Mary, for being part of this. And now you're part of the New York Times Read Along family. People who've been doing this for 5 years. So we're very grateful to have you. Let's look at 5 dishes to cook this week. Look at all these great. What kind of cook are you?
I'm sorry?
What kind of cook are you?
Oh, I'm a wonderful cook, and I love to cook. It's because before with the Op-Ed Project and my work, I traveled so much. Eating it out was sort of a chore. So eating in is a luxury. I love seafood, of course, being from Baltimore, and I also love to bake. I bake a lot, though my son is gone, so I have to watch it because or else the baked goods would be here. But it's been interesting since COVID. You have all of the, yeast and baking flour and things are going off the shelf because people are having to do it. But I used to edit Michael Pollan, the food writer, when
Wow.
he worked for the Times. Well, he didn't. He contributed to that, and we have kept in touch. But he, of course, says that if everyone cooked, it would be healthier, no matter what, because it just naturally is. Even something like French fries, when you had to make it, it was a chore and you wouldn't have it that often. But now that you can get it at fast food 3 times a day, yeah, and usually those potatoes are full of chemicals because people don't want a blemish on them. So, but I love to cook, and
I should say I'm a huge fan of Michael Pollan and his writing and his work, and I think he influenced me a lot in thinking about this fads of diets and things like that. He said, "Eat less, eat just a few words." In a few words, he basically said, "Eat more plants." He's not saying turn vegetarian. Eat food, mostly plants. That's what he said. He's not saying you only have to eat plants, but mostly plants. And I'm a big fan. So we might ask you to give us a recommendation so that we can invite him on the show one day.
He'd be great. He also likes regularity because he says, I think that he eats oatmeal every morning. Because my husband does that. He eats pretty much a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and yogurt every morning. And he says regularity is nice. It's not a bad thing. Well,
we're tired of the regularity now, aren't we?
I think we are.
What do you make of this? The New York Times, I don't know if they'd started doing all of this, online courses, high school programming. Learn from Times journalists without leaving home is the headline here in this ad from the school of the New York Times.
I think it's great. I feel like the moment I stop learning, I'll be in the ground. Always something that you can learn, increase your knowledge, give you an insight on how to look at things differently. Why not? And if you're home, there's only so many things you can watch on the tube.
That's right. But it also shows you how the Times is branching out, trying new things and new revenue sources as well. And we'll just look very quickly at the book review. Many people have already said they're waiting for your book, so we'll just look at the book review and I like looking at the bestseller list. So we'll give you a preview of what's happening here. Oh, look at this, you're writing. So the hardest part of writing is showing up, is actually doing the work.
It's very true. It's very true. It's really, as you know, Sri, so people say, oh, you make it look so easy, and I want to shake them because it's like blood. It's opening the vein, and you want to get the right word, and you criticize everything you do, but you got to sit there and do it and just keep writing the cat in the hat or whatever over and over till it hits. Just get something down, even that first bad draft, something. But it is, I think you have to be a bit of a masochist. But at the same time, now is the time to do it, to get your voice out, as we say in the Op-Ed Project.
Nice. Look at all these honors you've gotten: SPJ, Association of Women in Communications, National Headliners, NABJ, and the Thomas Wolfe Award. Tell us about that last one.
Oh, the Thomas Wolfe Award, I did a narrative of Confederate heritage groups, if you can believe it. I always, as I said, like to learn something, and I've never been afraid to go into places. And this, I wrote about all these groups that meet that are very interested in the Confederacy. And there are different kinds. Some of them are Sons of Confederate Veterans. You've heard of these folks, that they really want to say that the Confederacy was more about states' rights and they want to raise it up. They really downplay the slavery, enslavement part of it. And when I would go to these meetings, anybody who had a relative that enslaved men, women, and children would say, but they treated them like family. And it was, you go to these meetings where they don't salute the American flag. They salute the Confederate flag. Some started their meetings by singing Dixie and ending that with a rebel yell. And some of the groups like League in the South are more, they basically said that the country started going down morally when the South lost the Civil War. And I even spoke with a Black Confederate reenactor, because there were a few Blacks that fought the Confederacy. Some went with the person that enslaved them, and he went to that. So I, for a while there, was doing a lot. I went to the first National Tea Party Convention in Nashville, in Tennessee, and I was covering that. It was so interesting to me. But the Confederate one was fascinating, and my husband would be worried, and when I would go to these meetings sometimes far away and say, if I don't hear from you in a couple of hours, I'm going to call the police. And I would get back and say, well, the police were there. It kind of explains it. Very many members were police or former police. I found that was the case. And some of them were people like lawyers and doctors that you would see. But they were very drawn to the regimented piece of it, because the organizations would be called like the Second Armies of the Tennessees or something. And they would say, I'm a lieutenant colonel, whatever. And I just found it eye-opening. So I did write about that. I wrote a long narrative and won the Thomas Wolfe Award and got responses. Some were good, but I heard from Confederate folks from all over the world. They have organizations all over the world, and some did not like what I wrote. And I get some bad stuff too, that I don't want to get into too much detail, but as the op-ed project said, if you say things of consequence, there may be consequences, but the alternative is to be inconsequential. And
ooh, I love that. Say that again, please.
If you say things of consequence, this is the op-ed project, there may be consequences, but the alternative is to be inconsequential. And I do, as an African-American woman writing on issues of race, the upside is I'm very visible and I get a lot of great responses. The downside is I get responses from people who don't feel I should be out there. Some of them who resent more who I am than what I say. And you get your threat or two. I've had a couple of threats that had to be taken seriously. And that's just, and now I've gotten a few lately just because I think people are talking about inequality and changing systemic racism and trying to remedy it. And many people think of that as a positive, but there are those who think of that as a threat to their well-being. I think mainly folks who are kind of insecure and they need to feel somebody is inferior. And as I said, I don't want to dwell on it because it's not the majority of things I get, but I have to
understand
that element there.
Thank you, and please stay safe out there. Sunny says today with at Sri on the read along, by the way, Sunny_Slaughter. As a Black woman, I've not been able to truly show myself because it was not encouraged. This statement spoke to my spirit for all the times I was made to feel I was not good enough. Everyone follow Sunny_Slaughter.
I definitely will. It sounds like we are kins. We are sisters in spirit in many ways. It's funny because when you go in an organization, they say, we want you because we want your perspective. And sometimes when you get there, they say, well, okay, but change a little bit. So this book is going to be revealing in many ways about me, but more about America.
Sending big hugs to the entire production crew. Thank you for bringing us these amazing shows with content that change all of us. Beautiful line, Sunny. Thank you very much. And now we're really out of time. We're so grateful to you for your Sunday with us, Mary. Tell us what you're going to be doing the rest of the day.
It's going to be busy. At 1, I'm going to be on a Zoom call with an organization of Black journalists, Journalisms. Richard Prince runs that, which is a newsletter of what's going on in the business. He's a former Washington Post person, and it's going to be out of Washington, and we're going to have a meeting. And then I'm going to be taping in my dining room a segment for tonight. I'm going to be on television tonight, and I'll be taping it. And then hopefully I might have a chance later to do a little bit of exercise, something like that. And it seems like even though you're inside, everything is as busy as ever. So that'll be on WCCB later tonight. And I'm not quite sure what I'll be talking about. I'll see. There's so much. I give them like 3 or 4 ideas, and the hosts, the 2 anchors, kind of say, okay, why don't you talk about this? And then I do about 3 minutes, 3-4 minutes on that. So I used to go into the studio pre-COVID and have a conversation. So this isn't quite as good,
But isn't it easier to be working from home and not having to go into the studio and deal with all of that for a few minutes?
well, I like the interaction though. It's more of a conversation than this is more of a produced segment. I work with the producers, and they kind of do cut-ins and things. So I do miss it. Would be great to be with you.
Yes, of course. We used to be able to do that.
And in New York, I miss my Broadway. Every time I come up to do work or to do a lecture with the Op-Ed Project or meet a source, I would always squeeze a show in. And I had actually tickets to come to see something in April when I was coming up to do 2 seminars. And I was going to see my son. I was going to see Hangman, Martin McDonough, which closed before it opened. And also I was going to moderate a panel of a photography show in Tribeca, Women Are Beautiful, by the wonderful photographer, Ruben Natal San Miguel. I wrote the exhibit essay, and a picture of me is in the exhibit, but it closed yesterday online. But maybe he's going to make a book of it. So that was fun for me because I was on the other side of the camera for a change. But COVID has changed everything. So, but we'll work with it. We'll work with it. So what are you up to?
By the way, Chitachi says, thank you, Mary Curtis. This was fantastic. And you also mentioned my friend, Richard Prince. Please give him my best. He's an amazing journalist.
Yes.
Who has shined a light on so many wonderful undercovered stories and people for years and years now. So please give him my best. And Amber, thanks for an inspiring show. Typically, on the weekends, things are quiet, but not in this house. We're at the beach, so the kids I hope are going to go hit the beach. I have, right after this, our show, She's on Call. I'm the executive producer, a co-executive producer with my friends Marina and Sujana, 2 surgeons. And so I will be behind the camera in that and pushing the buttons. And I'm just honored to do that. So everyone, please tune in at 11 a.m. Eastern time so that everybody can see that as well. And then tonight we have a positivity episode where we try to be positive. And here's the show. And they have 2 guest doctors this time, Dr. Susmita Pati and Dr. Quinn Capers IV. And they're both going to be on at 11 a.m. Eastern. Everybody, please tune in, follow at She's on Call. And then my positivity show is 9 p.m. Eastern, where we try to be positive in the middle of every horrible, rotten thing that's going on in the world. So please tune in at 9 p.m. Eastern on these same channels, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And with that, Mary, we're going to let you go and wish you the very best. And we'll have you back when the book is out.
Well, I will. And thank you for your positivity. I think we're in the middle of so many pandemics, health, economic, racial, that we certainly need that positivity. Right? So I definitely will be looking out for that. And thank everybody for your wonderful comments and tuning in and reading the Times, which of course I get it every day. I don't work there anymore, but always interesting stories. So have a wonderful Sunday, everyone.
And please, everyone, please tag your friends on this so they can watch the recording. It'll start right up after we're off the air on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn so that people can watch it. And we're live every single Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. And we have a terrific guest next week. So I'm going to have Neil. There he is. Neil's back to talk about who we have coming up and to thank our sponsors. And Mary, goodbye. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Neil.
Absolutely, Sri. And before we do that, I want to do Mary justice because we didn't get a chance to read a little bit more about her. We covered a lot about her work. One of the things I want to make sure we covered was that she was chosen to be included in the History Makers, the single largest archival collection of its kind in the world, designed to promote and celebrate the success and to document movements, events, and organizations that are important to the African-American community. When we spoke, that was something that really stood out for me, and I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to cover that. Next week, I can't tell you how proud I am to be guest hosting the show. Again, Carla Baranauckas, thank you for putting us in touch with Claire Smith, a member of the National Baseball Hall of Fame as a writer. She was a sports journalist, the first woman to cover the Yankees with the Hartford Courant, and then she was a national columnist for the New York Times, and she's currently an ESPN news editor. I will be guest hosting. We will be talking about more than just baseball, of course, even though the truncated COVID-19 limited baseball season is starting just a few days after this show will air. We will be covering a range of different issues around journalism, what it's like to be a Black journalist, as Mary Curtis talked about a little bit earlier today, what it's like to be a woman in journalism. Claire was famously thrown out of the San Diego Padres locker room in 1984 and was prevented from doing her job. So she has a tremendous story to tell. So we are definitely looking forward to that. And as always, Sri, thank you for trusting me with your show and allowing me to guest host. Got my Yankee hat on in preparation for next week. And if just in case it was lost on anyone earlier when we were promoting the show, just want to make sure that people saw that next week, of course, July 19th is going to be Claire Smith, Yankees fan Neil Parekh to guest host, in case that was lost. But we had a great show with Mary Curtis today.
And I just want to say, if people are wondering if I'm traveling or something, because that's how you've always stepped in when I travel. I was supposed to go to Puerto Rico, which a place I love and great meaning to me and my family. But because of the pandemic, we're not going. But I still wanted to make sure that you got a chance to talk to Claire Smith, and you will do it great justice, and you'll do her justice. So I'm excited to watch as a fan and maybe push some buttons in the back as you're doing your read along.
Thank you, Sri. And as Sunny says, right up my alley. And big thanks to Carla for putting us in touch with Claire and scheduling another great guest. Again, great show with Mary C. Curtis. We are here every week at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You've been doing the show for 5 years. I've been helping for almost 3 years now.
I want some ideas on what we should do for our 5th anniversary. We didn't really mark it, but it's coming up in August. So we should think of how we can do that. Maybe an epic guest, maybe something else. But if you folks who are watching have an idea on how we should celebrate our 5th anniversary, please let us know. We're always looking for fun ideas. But we've got to now thank our sponsors. And
absolutely. So let's go ahead and thank Muckrack.
Muckrack, please check out the free certification program, mrac.co/social. It's about 2 hours work, and you get a free certificate at the end, and you get better at social media. So many people have written in thanking us and showing off their certificates live on. They learn about Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So everyone, please check that out.
And we'd also like to recognize Magic Bus USA. Magic Bus imagines a world where children break out of poverty and lead fulfilling, rewarding lives, contributing to their community and to the world around them. As you can see, 7 out of 10 adolescents do not have a higher secondary qualification. 6 out of 10 youth do not have the soft skills necessary for employment. And 3 out of 10 girls are married before they reach the age of 18. These stats are, of course, are from India, where Magic Bus does their work. In addition to Magic Bus and Muckrack and Magic Bus USA, we'd also like to thank Strategy Focus Group. Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Thank you again to Greg Gallant and Mike Schneider from Muckrack, Pradnya Haldapur from Magic Bus USA, and Ron Thomas from Strategy Focus Group. And you can learn more about the great work they're doing at readalong.link/Muckrack readalong.link/magicbususa and readalong.link/strategy focus group. If you're interested in being a sponsor of the New York Times Read Along, please contact either Sri or myself, and we would be happy to talk to you about sponsorship opportunities. Finally, Sri, what I'd like to do, as we did in the beginning of the show, really thank and honor our production team. Did you want to say something before I did that?
I want to say about our sponsors. It makes such a difference that we're able to put together a professional session like this for you every single Sunday, and that's only because we have sponsors. So everybody who's watching, we are very reasonable sponsorship rates, and if you want to promote a book or promote a project or give a shout out to a nonprofit, just contact us, and it makes a difference in the work we do. I do want to read a couple of the comments before we go to our production team.
Absolutely.
What makes this possible? Sunny says, way to go, Carla is a rock star. And Jonathan has an idea for the 5th anniversary, a read along of the very first issue of the Sunday New York Times. That'd be interesting to look at. We could certainly, we have access to the Times archive as the Times, the Times machine. And so we could look at that. And Patricia suggests a marathon for this and says that we could keep reading this because there's so much to read. Mark says he has his Muckrack Academy certificate. Thank you, Mark. And Sunny says,
do as well, just so you know.
Too. You could teach this stuff. And Sunny says, I got my certificate and I'm so much better at social media. Someone in Thailand just mentioned it yesterday. Everyone, it's a free certification. No reason you wouldn't do it. Just find it online or just ask me for it. Just Muckrack Academy. If you search it, you'll find it. And Paula says, hi, Ron. It's called My Rebel Journey. And that's one of the comments that was
one of the articles.
One of the articles that he was asking about. And I'm just so happy with our chat today. And let's give a shout out to that production team led by Neil, who just wanted to help out a couple of years ago. And now we've made it into a full-blown business that we have that I'm able to lead, where we are telling stories in this virtual in virtual events. We have shows that we are put together for others. If you would like your own show, we're working with Carnegie Corporation. We're working with Steve Van Zandt. We're working with Merrill Brown and Alex Leo of the News Project and so many others, and also virtual events. So please get in touch with me, sree@sree.net. We want to work with you. Don't cancel your conference without talking to us. Don't postpone it without talking to us, and don't plan it without talking to us. We created the world's largest teacher conference, 100,000 teachers in 3 languages from 88 countries, and that was led by this guy and me. We were able to put that together for our dear friend Vikas Pota and the T4 conference. So let's take a look at our amazing production crew.
I was going to say one idea for the anniversary might be to do at minimum, if not a marathon. Before we thank our team, I want to make sure that they know we're not signing them up for a marathon in August before we talk to you. But maybe we would do 2 shows, one for the West Coast a little later in the afternoon. That's something we've often talked about. But we will certainly discuss the marathon idea before launching it. But in particular, I want to remind folks that this does take a village to put together. Sri has been the host for 5 years, as we've said. I've been on board for about 3 years now as the executive producer and guest host. But we could not do this show without Paula, Kiger, Steve Taylor, and Julia Weeks and Carla Baranauckas. They have really stepped up over the last several months, really since December, since we started moving to this app called StreamYard to do the production. It was only occasional times when I stepped in to guest host that Paula would step in to be the Facebook producer. And, almost overnight, we went to Paula, I'm going to need you every week. And she didn't hesitate. So thank you, Paula, Steve, Julia, and now Carla Baranauckas, the newest member of our team. As I said, hitting a home run almost every time she swings in terms of getting guests, people like Harlan Coben and Mickey Maynard, just to name a few, former Detroit bureau chief for the New York Times. And today's guest, Mary Curtis, Trish Hall last week, and Claire Smith next week. And she's not done yet.
That's a hat trick by her. 3 guests in a row. That's fantastic. Please follow all of these folks on Twitter, at Big Green Pen, at Steve DeReeve, at Julielle Weeks, at Kabara, and at Neil Parekh.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for Ron Thomas calling us the A-Team. And Sunny has a great idea, having people do congratulations for the 5th anniversary. You've done that for the street COVID-19 call. So that might be something to consider. Chitaji is saying thank you. And Ellen has been watching for 5 years. So that might be, we can find out which of our guest viewers have been watching the whole time. So that might be interesting.
The Met tours. I used to do weekly Met tours for anybody who wanted to join me as I discovered the Met. I was the chief digital officer for 3 years and really loved that. If you ever check out the hashtag, the number 3 Met years, 3 METYEARS on Twitter, you'll see my journey of 3 years at the Met. Probably 50, 60 postings. They've had more than 1 million views, impressions of those of that Twitter thread. So definitely check that out.
And as we close, we'll just remind people of our guest today. If you caught the show in the middle, you can watch the replay right afterward. So again, our guest was Mary C. Curtis, award-winning journalist, trainer, and speaker, former New York Times editor with the CQ Roll Call and the Op-Ed Project as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and we look to see you next week, same time, same place.
And
take care.
Don't forget to watch She's on Call at 11 p.m. in about 30 minutes. Everybody join us 11 a.m. Eastern for this show about medical issues. We didn't cover them that much today because we know you can watch it every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern at She's on Call, and also my 9 p.m. daily COVID show. We've been on the air for 123 straight days, not missed a single episode. So thanks to our team that makes all of this possible. Thanks very much, everybody. And Ron says, I still can't remember how I discovered it. Best watch for the week. And Ron loved it so much he became a sponsor. How cool is that? And we love that when people are able to support us as well. Thank you, Ron, and good luck in Dubai and everything else you do.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.